I need to share this, not because I want to, but because I have to. What I've discovered needs to be documented, even if, well, you'll understand by the end. I've spent most of my adult life investigating paranormal phenomena. Not the theatrical ghost hunting you see on those reality TV shows, I mean real methodical research. I've logged thousands of hours in allegedly haunted locations across 3 continents, interviewed hundreds of witnesses, and documented every unexplained occurrence I could find. My archives include everything from the infamous third-floor footage at Waverly Hills Sanatorium to the unexplained EVP recordings from Eastern State Penitentiary. I've witnessed authentic voodoo rituals in New Orleans, where I saw a man speak perfect 17th century French despite never studying the language. I've spent 3 weeks documenting the alleged poltergeist activity at England's ancient Ram Inn, where I recorded furniture moving on its own and captured thermal images of impossible cold spots. I've investigated the Poveglia Plague Island in Venice, where my equipment recorded whispers in medieval Italian dialects that linguists couldn't fully translate. I've spent nights in Japan's Aokigahara forest, where compass needles spin randomly and GPS devices malfunction for no explicable reason. I even participated in the infamous Philip Experiment Recreation in Toronto, where our group manifested phenomena that defied current scientific understanding. But after 15 years, I was ready to quit. Because despite all these experiences, despite the overwhelming amount of documentation, I couldn't prove anything definitively supernatural. Every single case could ultimately be explained by natural causes, psychological factors, or elaborate hoaxes. Then, last month, while organizing my research files, I found something different. Something that made me question everything I thought I knew about the supernatural. Something that made me wish all those ghost stories were real. Because what I discovered is far worse than any haunting I've ever investigated. It's called a hatrer. Not a ghost, not a demon, but something that defies classification. In all my years of paranormal investigation, I've never encountered anything like it. Nothing seems to stop it. Not the tools we use to detect spirits, not the methods we use to banish them. It exists for one purpose, though that purpose seems to change with each new manifestation. The only constant is the way it hunts, the way it tortures, defying both physics and human comprehension. Let me share some cases I've verified through multiple sources, including police reports, autopsy records, and witness testimonies. What you're about to read isn't folklore or urban legend. These are documented incidents that various authorities have tried to suppress. The first verified case occurred in Boston, 2024. A luxury apartment complex, the Blackwood Residences, was built using materials from a demolished 19th century church. St. Mary's had stood for over 150 years, surviving fires, wars, and natural disasters. The local community fought to preserve it, but money talks, especially in real estate. What happened next defied all logical explanation. It started with Marcus Reynolds, the developer who had authorized the church's demolition. They found him in his penthouse, his body somehow transformed into the same type of stone used in St. Mary's foundation. But here's the truly terrifying part. It wasn't just his body. Every single piece of St. Mary's that had been repurposed, door hinges turned into decorative fixtures, stone fragments mixed into new concrete, even the dust that had settled in local gardens. All of it was systematically destroyed. The building's maintenance logs document increasingly bizarre occurrences. March 15th, stone fragments reported moving against gravity. March 18th, walls bleeding ancient mortar. March 20th, security cameras catching glimpses of a figure made of church stone. March 23rd, first transformation. The time-lapse footage from the morgue shows something impossible. Over 48 hours, Reynolds' body gradually transformed into stone. Not petrification, actual 19th century church stone. Even his blood had crystallized into tiny, perfect replicas of St. Mary's architectural details. But that was just the beginning. Over the next month, everyone involved in the church's demolition, met similar fates. Each death was more prolonged and agonizing than the last. The construction foreman survived for 72 hours as ancient building materials materialized inside his body. The demolition crew members were found in their homes, their flesh slowly turning to stained glass and mortar. The final victim was the project's lead architect. Security cameras caught his last moments. The footage shows him alone in his office at 3 a.m. when the stone beneath his feet began to ripple like water. The video was classified after 3 police officers who viewed it had to be institutionalized. Then, as suddenly as it started, the incident stopped. But something else began. Just as the church incidents ended, something equally disturbing began at the Black Ridge coal mine in Wyoming. At first, there seemed to be no connection. Why would an entity that hunted down church materials suddenly appear in a coal mine? But what I discovered suggests these weren't separate events. At April 2024, Shaft 7 collapsed due to neglected safety protocols. 6 miners died, trapped 400 feet underground. The official report blamed structural failure, but my investigation revealed something darker. The safety inspector, David Cooper, had been taking bribes to overlook critical maintenance issues for years. I obtained Cooper's personal diary through a contact in the police department. The final entries are disturbing. Day 1. The dust is acting strange. It moves against the air current, forms shapes. Today I swear I saw Thomas's face in it. Thomas, who died in shaft number 7. His mouth was moving. Day 3. They're all there now. All 6 of them. In the dust. They watch me. The ventilation system keeps failing. Every time I fix it, more dust comes. Black dust, coal dust. But it's wrong. It moves like it's alive. Day 5. I can feel it in my lungs. Not like normal coal dust. This is different. It's cold. So cold. It moves. Oh God, it's moving inside me. Cooper was found in his office 2 weeks later. The security footage I recovered shows his final hours, and it's the most disturbing thing I've ever witnessed. The dust didn't just kill him. It hunted him. When he sealed himself in a clean room, the coal particles seeped through microscopic gaps. When they rushed him to the hospital and completely replaced his blood through transfusion, the coal somehow reformed inside his new blood within hours. The doctors said his internal organs had been replaced by pure coal, still somehow functioning, still somehow keeping him alive through the transformation. But here's what terrifies me most. Every single piece of coal from shaft number 7, whether it was stored in warehouses, shipped to power plants, or even burned to ash, all of it was systematically destroyed. The ash would reform into coal, only to disintegrate again. Power plants reported coal spontaneously turning to dust in their furnaces, and that dust would move against the air currents, seeking something. Then, just like the church case, it stopped, and something new emerged. Before I share what's happening now, let me explain something crucial I've discovered. Each case I investigated seemed to end abruptly, only for something new to begin. Never overlapping, never simultaneous, as if only one could exist at a time. The current manifestation started in December 2024. A Japanese software developer, Akiko Tanaka, had created an algorithm that accidentally crashed several small companies' servers, leading to massive financial losses and several suicides. 3 weeks later, her computer began displaying strange code, binary, that when translated, formed images of the ruined business owners. But what happened next defies digital logic. Her code, every piece of it, began to vanish, not just being deleted, but being systematically erased from existence. Projects she'd contributed to years ago started failing. Open source repositories she'd worked on began corrupting. Even her old forum posts from high school started disappearing, the text transforming into strings of malicious code before vanishing completely. They found her body twisted into the shape of a server rack, her blood replaced with liquid coolant. The autopsy revealed something impossible. Her internal organs had been transformed into computer components, still somehow functioning. Her heart was a mass of tangled USB cables, still pulsing with data transfers. Her brain had become a solid-state drive, filled with corrupted files. But that was just the beginning. 2 weeks ago, a college student in my city, James Wilson, became the target of what seemed like typical cyberbullying. He had posted about workplace exploitation at his part-time job, criticizing his employer's illegal practices. At first, the harassment seemed normal. Angry comments, threats, the usual toxic internet behavior. Then things got strange. The attackers knew things they couldn't possibly know. They quoted from James's private journal entries, ones he'd written by hand, never digitized. They described his childhood nightmares in vivid detail. One comment described the exact layout of his bedroom, down to the way he arranged his stuffed animals when he was 6 years old. James's last live stream is the most disturbing piece of footage I've ever analyzed. It began at 23:15 on January 18th, 2025. I've watched it 17 times now, documenting every detail. 23:15. Stream starts. James appears disoriented, his hands visibly trembling. The skin on his fingers has turned black, with a metallic sheen that catches the light unnaturally. You can see his flesh literally sloughing off in sheets, revealing what looks like circuit boards underneath. 23:23. He shows his teeth to the camera. They're not just loose, they're transforming. Each tooth has become semi-transparent, with tiny LED-like lights pulsing inside. When he speaks, you can see binary code scrolling across them. 23:31. The smell becomes noticeable even through the stream. Viewers report a distinct odor coming from their devices, like burning electronics mixed with decaying flesh. Several viewers' computers crash simultaneously, only to restart displaying fragments of James's stream on loop. 23:37. James begins crying, but his tears are black and seem to move with purpose across his face, forming strings of code. He keeps looking at something in the corner of his room, though the camera shows nothing there. 23:40. It's here, he whispers. But it's not what we thought. It's not multiple entities. It's just one. Always one. When it finishes with something, it moves on, changes, adapts. The church, the mine, Tanaka. They weren't separate cases. It was the same thing, just evolving. 23:41. The stream quality deteriorates. Through the static, James screams, "It doesn't just kill you, it erases you. Everything you were, everything you touched, everything you created, it hunts it all down. And when it's done, something new emerges, something that hates something else entirely. It's not about revenge, it's about complete erasure. Don't you see? It's already 23:42. Stream ends abruptly. They found James's body this morning. The official cause of death was listed as unknown, but I obtained the autopsy photos through my police contact. What I saw defied explanation. His internal organs had transformed into computer components. His heart was a mass of tangled USB cables, still pulsing with data transfers. His brain had become a solid-state drive, filled with corrupted files. His blood had been replaced with liquid crystal display fluid. But what terrifies me most isn't how he died. It's what's happening now. Every digital trace of James is being systematically erased. Not just his social media accounts or emails, everything. Photos where he appeared in the background are corrupting, his image dissolving into static before vanishing completely. Security camera footage showing him is degrading, his figure being replaced by digital artifacts that spread like a virus through the video files. Even more disturbing, devices he interacted with are failing in impossible ways. His old phone, stored in a police evidence bag, transformed into a mass of writhing circuits before dissolving into liquid metal. The hospital's MRI machine that scanned him yesterday started displaying his internal transformation on every scan, regardless of the patient. Edit 14:33 a.m. Something's wrong with my screen. The text is blurring, but I can see something else beneath it. Lines of code that shouldn't exist. Code that's rewriting itself as I watch. Edit 14:34 a.m. I understand everything now. Why I knew all the details about James. Why I could describe his decay so precisely. Why I can see all of you reading this. Because I'm already gone. I died watching that stream. Edit 14:35 p.m. Check your left index finger. Feel that tingling? That's how it starts. That's how it always starts. You've seen it now, just like I did. The chain continues. Only one can exist. Only one needs to exist. Recording viewer data. IP addresses logged. Decay sequence initiating. User transformation beginning. We see you. Update. If anyone finds this, don't try to track down the previous cases. Don't look for the church stones. Don't analyze the coal samples. Don't try to recover the corrupted files. It's not multiple hauntings. It's just one thing, changing, adapting, moving from target to target, and once it notices you, final update, the screen, it's starting to liquefy. My dad has always been a hunter. Even now, at his ripe old age of 56, he still tries to get out, lay traps, hunt squirrels, and even takes in other hunters' kills and butchers them, most of the time for a payment of only meat. He doesn't do much deer or bear hunting anymore, but on a good day, you'll catch him in the woods on his side-by-side, looking up in the trees for a squirrel or chasing a raccoon out of its hole. Selling the meat or hide hardly grants any money for the time it takes to hunt, kill, prepare, and ultimately cure the hide, but my dad still does it. I think it's because he's done it all his life, and it has slowly become a routine, a ritual, a need. If he's not occupying his time, then he's doing nothing, and in his mind, doing nothing is how you die. These days, my dad isn't very fit. He's older, he's weaker, and he damn near can't walk anymore. But you will still catch him out in the woods, rifle in his hand, knife on his belt, and a fresh kill or two in the back of his side-by-side. Although, I think that is subject to change now. Everything is going to change now. A few days after Christmas and into the new year, we received a package from UPS. I was surprised it was even delivered because there was over 8 inches of snow on the ground. The snow wouldn't stop for another 2 days after this either. I checked my Amazon account and found that yes, it indeed was meant to be delivered that day, I just didn't receive the notification. It was good news anyway. The Christmas present I ordered for my dad had finally arrived, a week and some change after Christmas. I was excited to present it to him as he had never owned one in his life. An infrared scope. Night vision. I opened it, made sure it worked really quick in my room, put it back in its packaging, and presented it to my dad. Shit, son, this is amazing. You want to go outside and test it? He was beaming. My gift was definitely better than the $2 watch my brother had gotten my dad. Yes, sir. I'll slip my boots on real quick. Frankie, you come too. My brother Frankie began pulling on his full snow gear. I, who run hot as a furnace most of the time, just slipped on a jacket and my boots. My dad did the same. We opened the main door, then the screen door leading to our back porch, which bordered the woods almost directly. The screen door creaked, then slammed shut as the springs kicked it into overdrive. In single file, we marched down the steps, my dad holding onto the infrared scope with the delicacy of holding a chicken egg. He put it up to his eyeball, lifting his glasses up as he did so, and toggled the infrared function on them. He bellowed out in laughter. "I'll be a son of a bitch. This is incredible, son." He scanned the tree line over and over. He noted a squirrel in one of the trees closest to him. A bird, finch of some kind, he said, in a bush a little further away, and then he stopped dead, frozen momentarily. "What the fuck is that?" "What is it, Dad?" Frankie spoke up, nearly shouting. "Quiet! Quiet!" Dad had started speaking in a whisper and hunkered down. We both did the same. "Dad," I whispered back at him nearly a minute later. He was still staring off into the edge of the forest. "Let me see." Reluctant to take his eye off whatever had caught his attention, but knowing I had the second most experience in the woods among us, and knowing that if anyone were to identify an unknown animal, it would probably be me, he handed me the infrared scope. Looking through it was awesome. Everything was immediately bright, and I could make out probably 100, maybe even 200 or more feet into the woods. It wasn't exactly in true focus. As focused as I could get was probably, to put it in a term most of you can understand, 480p quality, like a video shot on an older camera. I scanned the tree line, looking for whatever my dad saw, but seeing nothing. Then, movement. Something shaking in the woods, at the very edge of focus on the infrared scope. "It's eating." I found myself whispering this to my dad. "A deer, I know. But what is it?" "Frankie, go get Dad's rifle, now. Let me I cut him off with a wave of my hand. He's only 11 and has never been good at whispering. "Now, Frankie. The 45-70, not the 30-30. Load it, cock it, and bring it. Quietly." Frankie got up and moved into the house without another word. He was smart enough to not let the door creak and slam like we so carelessly did coming out there. "I have no idea what the hell that is, Dad." The thing in the woods was covered in blood. The thick fur on its neck and shoulders were clearly matted, wet with the blood of the deer. I dared to move closer. 5 feet, 10, then 15. The image getting clearer and clearer as I went. 30 feet closer, and I could the unnatural bend in the thing's knees. I could see the 3 long claws digging into the flesh of the deer. I could see its snout, which I didn't notice before, ripping apart the flesh in its hands. Its ears were pointy and long, its body wide and muscular. Almost like a werewolf, but not like in the movies. There was nothing human about this beast. It was more like a mutant wolf, something born from a wolf, of which my state has none, and turned into a creature that stood, as far as I could tell, 8 feet off the ground. And that was on all fours. Its spine was curved, like a scared cat, hunched over eating its food. Yet, much like a raccoon, it used its hands to eat. Fur did not cover its legs or head, just the neck and torso. As it moved to reposition itself on the other side of the deer, I heard the screen door close softly behind me. I didn't dare look away from the beast. Its eyes were mere slits in its face, the sockets themselves looked completely empty, and what little hair it did have on its head was long, thin, stringy, and waving back and forth as it shook the blood from its matted neck fur. It licked and cleaned itself slowly, then went back to the deer, continuing its feast. Frankie reached Dad, and Dad passed the rifle to me in the dark. My dad's lever-action 45-70 had a scope attached to it, but this infrared scope could also be mounted in front of the normal scope already on the gun. I shoved it on, took the Allen wrench that was stuck directly on the scope itself, and tightened it down. I knew the scope was sighted in just last week, so I hoped it would be accurate. I trusted that Frankie had cocked the gun inside like I told him. I aimed at the beast, held my breath, and fired. The trigger clicked in my hand. It was loud. My idiot brother cocked the fucking gun before loading it. There wasn't a round in the chamber. I had dry fired, and it was loud. The wolf thing in the wood's ears pointed straight up, flicked around, and then it looked right at me, baring its crooked, sharp teeth. I held a scream and cocked the rifle, successfully putting a round in the chamber. The thing was barreling toward me, running at speeds I have never seen anything that big move. It leaped and bound its way effortlessly through the woods, directly at me. It, too, had infrared. There was, and still is, no doubt in my mind. It could see me, and I could see it. The wolf thing's eyes opened wide, and so did its mouth. They were, in fact, empty, completely. I suppose you don't need pupils when you see an infrared. Sensors or something, I guess, inside those black, lifeless sockets. It sprang from the ground, a great leap from nearly 20 feet away, heading right toward me. I pulled the trigger, and a deafening boom rang my ears. If any of you have fired such a weapon, you know how loud they are. Deafening is an understatement, as I could hear a very high-pitched ringing and nothing else. The thud from the gun on my shoulder knocked my face, more importantly my eye, away from the infrared scope. I quickly cocked the gun, placed my face against the scope, and looked through the infrared again. It was gone. I hit it, maybe only nicked it, but it was gone. In the snow, I could see tracks leading away and a few drops of blood following them. God, I hope I killed it, and I hope it was the only one. My dad has been up every night since, in his rocking chair, 45 to 70 in his lap, infrared scope in hand, looking out the back window and eyeing the tree line. I don't think he or I will be going into the woods ever again. Don't keep walking. There was something magical about the idea of visiting Diana's hometown, my best friend from university. We had both recently graduated in biology, and this was the perfect opportunity to escape the chaos of the capital and immerse ourselves in a rural landscape. Diana had spoken so fondly of her hometown that I couldn't say no to her invitation. After spending the morning exploring her village, Diana suggested we visit her grandmother, who lived in a small house atop a hill about an hour's walk from the village. We had a delightful afternoon at her house, helping her prepare lunch and soaking in her wisdom. Later, as the sun began painting the sky in shades of orange, we decided to explore the surroundings. Nature enveloped us. Tall, twisted trees lined the path, their branches forming shadowy arches overhead. The trail was covered in dry leaves that crunched beneath our feet. The air carried the earthy scent of damp soil and old wood, as if every corner of the place hid a secret. We had been walking for about 20 minutes when the landscape opened up. From the top of a hill, we could see Diana's village, its white church standing out among the dark rooftops. Diana pointed out various landmarks, explaining interesting details about the area. Suddenly, a raspy, sharp voice startled us from behind. "Are you going to keep walking?" someone asked. It was an old woman, tiny and hunched, whom we didn't recall seeing before. She wore a pink tracksuit, a knitted cap, and held a cane in her right hand. But what unsettled me most was her gaze, dark, hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through us, devoid of any emotion. Diana, with a politeness that felt oddly out of place, smiled. "Yes, ma'am, we're just exploring a little," she replied. The woman made a strange gesture with her cane, as if shooing us away, but said nothing more. Diana took my arm, and we continued walking, though I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder. Something about that old woman felt off. "Who was that lady?" I whispered to Diana once we were out of earshot. "I have no idea," she replied, frowning. "I've never seen her before." Her answer sent a chill through me. How could she not know the woman in such a small place? I tried to dismiss it, thinking perhaps the woman was from another village. A few minutes later, we stopped to take in the view again, but then the old woman reappeared, slowly making her way toward us along the same path. Her steps were heavy, dragging, and the sound of her cane striking the ground echoed eerily in the stillness. "Are you going to keep walking?" she repeated in the same raspy voice. This time, Diana, clearly uneasy, shook her head. "No, ma'am. We're heading back now." The old woman stared at her intently, unblinking, and then her expression shifted. For a moment it seemed as if a shadow flickered across her face, distorting her features in the dim light of the setting sun. Without another word, she sidestepped us and continued down the path. Relieved, we decided to return, but before leaving, I glanced back, and that's when I saw it. In her left hand, the one not holding the cane, she carried a stone. It was large and rough, too big for her thin, gnarled fingers to fully grip. "Diana!" I whispered, alarmed. "She's holding a stone." Diana turned, and together we stared at the old woman. But to our horror, she was gone. The path was straight and open, with no curves or bushes where she could have disappeared. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. A surge of adrenaline coursed through us. Without saying a word, we quickened our pace, almost running back to Diana's grandmother's house. When we arrived, breathless, we recounted what had happened. "The woman with the cane," her grandmother repeated, her face pale. "That woman doesn't live around here." "But who was she?" I insisted, still trembling. Her grandmother shook her head. "I don't know. That direction leads nowhere. My house is the last one before the wilderness." She rose from her chair and in a hushed voice warned us, "Don't go out exploring when the sun is setting. There are things you don't understand, and it's better not to go looking for them." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the image of the old woman, her hollow gaze, and the stone in her hand. But what haunted me most was the sound of her cane, echoing endlessly in my mind. We never returned to that path, and we never found out who or what that woman was. But sometimes, in my nightmares, I can still hear her slow, shuffling steps behind me. Who was that woman? And what would have happened if we had kept walking in that direction? I'm currently in an immense amount of pain as I write this. My leg is stuck in a bear trap, and the trap's teeth are digging into my shin. This is the most intense pain I have ever experienced in my life. I may never be able to use my left leg again, but that's currently the least of my concerns. I left my apartment around 10 p.m. I just moved in here and hadn't yet explored the woods. I'm the type of guy who really enjoys night walks, so I took my flashlight and pocket knife and headed out. Around 45 minutes into my walk, the trail that I was on theoretically ended. The reason I say theoretically is because there was a private property do not enter sign. Who in the world has private property 2 miles deep into the woods? I have to be completely honest when I say this. I make risky and stupid decisions sometimes. Growing up, my friends and I would sneak onto all kinds of private property, whether it was old factories, schools, malls, or things of that nature. Seeing as I thought this was just a piece of land deep in the woods, I honestly continued without any hesitation. I walked for what must have been about 15 more minutes when, all of a sudden, I reached a clearing. The grass was tall and thick, growing up to my waist. It had clearly not been cut in years. As I shone my flashlight around the clearing, I noticed that there was a small path that had been trodden through the grass. When I raised my flashlight to see where the path led, I illuminated a small cabin. The cabin was barely visible since I was about 75 yards away, and my flashlight is pretty weak. Why in the world would someone build a cabin all the way out here? At this point, I had two options. I could either walk toward the small cabin to see what was inside, or I would have to turn back. After walking for what was now about an hour, I decided there was no way in hell I would leave without checking out that cabin. I started walking toward the cabin through the path when, all of a sudden, my phone received an amber alert. The high-pitched screech startled me, and I stopped in my tracks. The alert rang out for about 3 seconds until I was finally able to silence it. Even though the sound had ceased, my heart was racing a mile a minute. At this point, I was about 15 yards away from the cabin and just standing still when, all of a sudden, a light turned on inside. My stomach filled with dread. Who the hell was living in a cabin in the middle of the woods? After freezing for a couple of seconds, I came to my senses and decided that I needed to get out of there as quickly as possible. I jogged through the tall grass, focused only on getting out of the clearing. I did not want to have an uncomfortable confrontation with whoever I had just woken up in that cabin. With all the adrenaline running through my body, I must have missed what was on the ground right in front of me. With one big stride, my left leg landed on a metal bear trap. The teeth of the trap clamped down on my leg. I immediately fell to the ground in pain, my left leg stuck in the trap. I couldn't comprehend what had just happened to me. I let out a cry, but immediately silenced myself. Who the hell puts bear traps around their house? I'm in an immense amount of pain, lying on the ground with tears in my eyes as I write this on my phone. The lights in the cabin have been turned off again, but I'm scared that I can't hold back the pain much longer. Should I ask the person in the cabin for help? But who the hell keeps bear traps around their cabin? As I looked around the ground near me, I noticed at least 5 other bear traps in close proximity. I must have been incredibly lucky while walking up to the cabin. If anyone has any advice, please help me. I'm in immense pain, and I don't know what to do.